There's a strange magic in music, something almost alchemical that makes certain sounds timeless, endlessly loved, endlessly played. To sell 1 million records, that's a mark of success. To sell 10 million, that's a career achievement. But to reach 100 million, it's like touching the untouchable. It takes something unique, something beyond ordinary talent. It takes magnetism. And then, as if that wasn't enough, a handful of artists have taken it to the next level, achieving this golden milestone twice, both as part of a band and as soloists. These rare few didn't just pass through music history, they reshaped it, wielding their talents with a kind of mastery that resonates across generations. Look at Paul McCartney, for instance. His story starts in post-war Liverpool, where he and John Lennon formed one of the most iconic creative duos in modern history. What they did with the Beatles changed the landscape of music, full stop. Before the world could blink, they went from playing small clubs in Hamburg to arenas packed with screaming fans. And it wasn't just the music, it was an entire phenomenon, Beatlemania, as they called it. Young people lost their minds over these 4 lads from Liverpool, who seemed to represent a kind of rebellion and joy that was both infectious and unprecedented. Their first album, Please Please Me, took the UK by storm. But that was just the beginning. Over the next decade, they produced hit after hit, album after album, each one pushing the boundaries of what popular music could be. By the mid-60s, the Beatles weren't just a pop band, they were cultural innovators. Albums like Rubber Soul and Revolver brought psychedelia to the mainstream, weaving in new sounds, deeper themes, and experimental techniques that were almost unheard of in popular music. And then there was Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, a record that blew the doors off every convention, immersing fans in a kaleidoscope of sound and setting the standard for what an album could accomplish. By the time they disbanded in 1970, the Beatles had sold over 600 million records globally. But even that dizzying number doesn't quite capture their influence. They didn't just change music, they shaped a generation's identity. When McCartney embarked on his solo career, people were curious, maybe even doubtful. Could he make it without Lennon by his side? He answered that question with a resounding yes. McCartney wasn't content to rest on his Beatles laurels. Instead, he dived straight back into the studio, eventually forming Wings with his wife Linda and a rotating lineup of bandmates. And Wings wasn't just a passion project, they were a bona fide success. With hits like Live and Let Die and Band on the Run, McCartney cemented his place as a force all his own, and his solo career took off. Throughout the 70s and 80s, McCartney remained a fixture on the charts, constantly evolving his sound to meet the moment while staying true to the melodic genius that had defined his work with the Beatles. By the end of it all, he'd sold over 100 million records as a solo artist, a testament to his staying power and sheer versatility. Then there's Michael Jackson. If McCartney changed the music landscape, Jackson electrified it. He started young, so young in fact, that he became a star before most kids hit middle school. As the lead singer of the Jackson 5, his voice had a kind of precocious power that cut through the noise and captivated audiences everywhere. Songs like I Want You Back and ABC were hits from the get-go, and with his brothers by his side, Jackson was part of a Motown dynasty. The Jackson 5's records flew off the shelves, their concerts sold out, and soon enough, they weren't just a family band, they were pop royalty. Their success was undeniable, bringing soul music to a mainstream audience and laying the groundwork for future generations of performers. But for Michael, the Jackson 5 was just the beginning. As he transitioned into adulthood, he set out on his solo journey with an ambition that was singular and unstoppable. He didn't just want to make a name for himself, he wanted to become a phenomenon, a legend, and he succeeded. His breakthrough solo album, Off the Wall, showed the world that he wasn't just the cute kid from the Jackson 5, he was something far bigger. And then came Thriller. Released in 1982, Thriller was more than an album. It was an event, a pop culture explosion that burned so brightly, it's still casting shadows today. With its infectious beats, haunting vocals, and revolutionary music videos, Thriller sold a staggering 66 million copies, becoming the best-selling album of all time. Between Billie Jean, Beat It, And of course, the title track, Jackson was unstoppable. By the end of his career, he'd sold over 300 million records as a solo artist. His combination of vocal prowess, dynamic dance moves, and sheer creative vision made him a figure beyond comparison, someone who didn't just command attention, but captured imaginations. Now, Phil Collins may seem like the outlier in this group, but he belongs here just as much as the others. Collins didn't rise to fame with a Lennon or a Motown name behind him. His story is one of evolution, a kind of relentless pursuit of his own sound. As the drummer for Genesis, Collins initially stayed in the background, providing the steady beats that grounded the band's progressive rock explorations. But when frontman Peter Gabriel left in the mid-70s, Collins stepped up to the mic, and the band's sound took on a new dimension. Genesis transitioned from an art rock group with cult appeal to a band with real commercial success, especially with albums like Invisible Touch and Genesis. Collins' drumming, his signature driving beats, coupled with his voice, gave Genesis a sound that was fresh, captivating, and ready for the mainstream. By the time Collins had finished his Genesis run, they'd sold over 100 million records. And like McCartney and Jackson, Collins didn't stop there. He stepped out on his own, crafting a solo career that was as surprising as it was successful. In the Air Tonight was his breakout moment, a song so haunting, so driven by that iconic drum break that it's become a fixture in pop culture. His solo work ranged from heartfelt ballads to upbeat pop hits, showcasing his ability to connect with listeners on a deeply emotional level. Songs like Against All Odds and One More Night were raw, direct, and intensely relatable, a far cry from the complexities of Genesis, but no less compelling. Collins' solo career went on to reach heights few could have predicted, with over 150 million records sold worldwide. He may not have had the glitter of Jackson or the Beatles' mystique of McCartney, but he carved out a place all his own, showing that the power of music doesn't always need the flash of stardom, it just needs sincerity and skill.
Why is Phil Collins one of the most vilified rock musicians? I think vilified, am I? Wow. I thought it was bad, but I didn't think it was that bad. Phil Collins now has gone from being one of the most reviled musicians, songwriters, to actually being the pillar of like modern culture or whatever it is they say. There's one. There's only 3 people apparently. This fact was thrown at me when they were putting together a biography for something. There's only 3 people that sold 1 million records in a group, and as a solo artist, there's McCartney, no surprise there. Michael Jackson, no surprise there, and me. And I think, well, that. I would never have thought that, and I'm sure a lot of other people don't think that, because I'm not in that kind of group, you know what I mean?
Together, these 3 artists represent something rare and nearly impossible to replicate. They didn't just succeed, they dominated again and again. Each of them reached across barriers, between band and solo work, across genres, even through personal challenges, and each time they found an audience ready to embrace them. They are icons not just because of the sheer volume of records they sold, but because of how they resonated with listeners. They made music that people turned to in celebration, in heartbreak, in rebellion, and in solitude. Their work spans generations, crossing boundaries of genre, geography, and time itself. McCartney, Jackson, and Collins didn't just make hits, they made memories. Their music became woven into the fabric of people's lives. You hear Let It Be, and you think of solace and connection. Billie Jean plays, and you feel the thrill of the beat. In the Air Tonight comes on, and you're caught in its dark, simmering tension. These songs are more than records, they're moments, emotions, and histories. And perhaps that's the secret behind their staggering sales. They didn't just produce songs, they offered pieces of themselves, fragments of emotion, and a sense of identity that listeners could latch onto. In the end, what sets McCartney, Jackson, and Collins apart isn't just numbers or accolades. It's their ability to cross boundaries, to break the mold of what's expected, and to do it again and again. They are, in many ways, the embodiment of music's potential, to inspire, to innovate, and to endure. And as long as people need music to fill the spaces of their lives, there will always be room for the sounds they crafted, the voices that defined eras, and the legacy they leave behind, resonating as powerfully now as ever.